Welcome back to Hebrew, Ehrveh, Ehrveh, the Black Man. My name is Sarah Majanku, and today the topic is my DNA. I did my DNA ancestry test. The two companies that I used are Ancestry DNA and 23andMe. You're probably wondering, Sarah, why would you do a DNA test? You already know where you're from. Well, that's true. But although I know that I am Ehrveh and I know the country where my parents are from, it is important that our brothers and sisters who were taken from us and scattered throughout the world even further, they also find their way back home. And I strongly believe that if those of us who know exactly where we're from do take these tests, it will help our brothers and sisters by beefing up the data pool so that eventually the test can be more specific. Right now, it's quite general. It's quite broad. So that's why they usually give you a region when you get your test results. So I do think it's important that those of us who do know where we're from take it so that we help our brothers and sisters find their way back to us. Now, I know there are some controversies about it where some people don't believe the accuracy of it. And some people also, believe in it being used as a weapon against us. And as far as the accuracy of it, that can easily be put aside because when we do DNA tests to prove paternity, we have no doubt about it, right? Most people have no doubt about it. You know, if they say you're not the daddy, you believe it, that you're not the daddy, and it's the same DNA test. So why is it that you don't believe this one when it's pertaining to your ancestry? So we have to think about that. As far as it being used as a weapon against us, I do believe that that is very possible. And obviously it is already being used in many ways, right? Although when they do their things by the grace of Yah, many a times they backfire and they're the ones who are most affected. We don't die, we multiply. Okay, we don't die, we multiply. So they can try and do whatever they do, but the Most High Yah has already decreed that He has already blessed us and that we will be numerous on the earth. So, they are only wasting their time. And truly, if they really wanted to use our DNA for any malicious intent, it's very easy for them to get it. They don't have to wait for us to spit in a tube in order for them to get our DNA. When you go to have your labs drawn, there's your DNA. When you go to the hospital to have any kind of procedure, there's your DNA. Even in your own home, your trash. If the powers that be really wanted to get your DNA, they could even get it from your trash. Okay. So let's just understand that if, they do have these capabilities and they know how to get your DNA. They don't have to wait for you to take a test in order to get it. The Ehrveh ethnic group was the most enslaved during the transatlantic slave trade. Let me say that again. The Ehrveh ethnic group was the most enslaved during the transatlantic slave trade. But why is it that whenever we do searches for Ehrveh people who were enslaved, we come up short? How is it that the people who were the most enslaved during the transatlantic slave trade are difficult to find? It doesn't make sense. Our land, the entirety of Ehrveh land, was named the Slave Coast and the Kingdom of Judah. But it was named the Slave Coast. While they had the Grain Coast, they had the Gold Coast, they had the Ivory Coast, then they had the Slave Coast, which was Ehrveh land. And that was where they primarily took most of the people from. So why is it difficult to find these people? A few factors are at play here. Although the Ehrvehs were unified through language and customs, they mainly resided in small acephalous kingdoms, meaning they were not under the rulership of a major king. Now, they used to be under the rulership of a major king. All the Ehrvehs used to be under Aja, which Aja is from Alada. Being divided into small kingdoms throughout West Africa did not work in the advantage of the Ehrveh people. It actually exposed us to the larger kingdoms who traded in arms and other things, and then eventually also in slaves, and became the slave capturing kingdoms such as the Asante kingdom, the Dahomey kingdom, the Oyo kingdom. And the Ehrvehs, unfortunately, their land, the Kingdom of Judah, also known as the Slave Coast, was nestled between those three powerful kingdoms. Between 1480 and 1550, Portuguese ships transported more than 30,000 slaves from the Bight of Benin and from Sao Tome into the Gold Coast, which had been a market for slave imports. The slaves were put to work in the gold fields of the Gold Coast or as agricultural laborers or sold to the northern slave markets. The Gold Coast trade in slaves, gold, and ivory drew in a plethora of European merchants. Source: Martin Meredith, 2014, The Fortunes of Africa, a 5,000-year history. Slaves were also acquired through slave raids and instigated internal conflicts. Ardra, also known as Alada, was a populous country full of large towns. It was by means of this country that so great a number of slaves were brought down to Ouidah and sold to the Europeans naked. Source: John Atkins, A Voyage to Guinea, 1735, page 131. It is estimated that by the end of the transatlantic slave trade, more than 6 million ethnic Ehrveh speakers, meaning Ehrveh, Aja-Ehrveh, Mina, Fon, etc., were taken from the Bight of Benin to plantations in Brazil, French Caribbean, British Caribbean, North America, Dutch America, Europe, Danish West Indies, Spanish America, and to some plantations within Africa. So there were people who were also enslaved within Africa itself. Now, when they refer to Gbe speakers, we have to understand that these are Ehrveh Gbe speakers. Gbe means language in Ehrveh. So that includes all the Ehrveh speakers, including all the dialects as well. So when we're talking about Gbe speakers, we're talking about obviously Ehrveh Gbe speakers, the Aja speaker, the Aja Gbe speakers, Mina, Fon-Gbe speakers as well. Because remember, Fon, the Fon ethnic group was a created ethnic group that was created out of the mixing of Aja with the native locals within the Dahomey area. So when Doaklin, now according to the Aja history, there were three brothers who founded Alada, and the three brothers decided to go their separate ways, and Doaklin went and founded Dahomey. Okay, and Doaklin, being an Aja, meaning that he was an Ehrveh, and all his people together founded Dahomey and mixed with the locals and ruled that area and created the Fon kingdom. That is what sprouted as the Fon kingdom. Okay, let's put the numbers into perspective. The population estimate of the Gold Coast in 1850 was 1.5 to 2 million people. The population estimate of the country Ghana in 2024 was 34.4 million people. If 6 million ethnic Ewe speaking people were taken from the Bight of Benin during the transatlantic slave trade, by 2024, if we use the same growth ratios without excluding the people who were lost at sea, we should have 102 million ethnic Ewe people in the diaspora in 2024. If we should use the conservative number, because some estimates are saying there were 2 million ethnic Ewes taken from the Bight of Benin, if we should use that conservative number of 2 million, then we should expect that there would be at least 30 million ethnic Ewe people in the diaspora today. Another factor which hinders our identification of the Ewe captives is the breakdown of the language into so many dialects. Already, there are about 5 main Be language cluster groups. There is the Ewe, there is Aja, there is Fon, there is Gan, and there is Fla or Fera. So these are the 5 main branches, and they're all between the countries of Ghana, Togo, Benin, and Nigeria. There are also Ewe-speaking people in Burkina Faso and in Ivory Coast. So within these 5 major branches, there are then subdivisions into dialects. So that is also to consider. And with each dialect cluster, those people who speak that dialect would go by a different name. So, for example, the Anglos go by Anglo and they speak the Anglo dialect. The Tongu also speak the Tongu dialect. The Gan speak the Gan dialect. The Mina speak Mina dialect, and they go by those names. And so they did not collectively go by under the umbrella Ewe, although they are aware that they are Ewe people. How likely is it that a European slaver would take the time to learn about these various, multiple, numerous divisions in the dialect clusters? It's very unlikely. And so what they typically did was to classify the people under the names of their captors. Meaning, an Asante slave was not necessarily an ethnic Asante. A Fon slave was not necessarily an ethnic Fon. An Oyo slave was not necessarily ethnic Oyo. So that is another factor that affects the identification of the Ewe captives during the transatlantic slave trade. A third factor is the piracy. There was a lot of piracy going on during that time. The various slaving companies were under contracts with their own governments to only capture or traffic people from the regions that their governments have annexed or have encroached on. If a slave ship was short on the numbers of humans they were supposed to get in order to make a profit, if they had the ammunition and manpower, they would pirate another slave ship. They pirated each other a lot, and they would attack the other slave ship and take and steal the cargo from the other slave ship. So when that happened, they would obviously not register those individuals they have stolen from the other slave ship under the locations they were primarily supposed to take them from. I studied the slave ship manifestos on slavevoyages.org, and I have noticed that the Ewe people who were taken have been very, very much underreported. And most of the times what I notice is the names that are obviously Ehrveh names are not found under Ehrveh ethnic group on slavevoyages.org. They are usually classified under Akan or Igbo or Yoruba. Very seldom will you find an Ehrveh name under Ehrveh ethnicity. Also, due to the fact that European slavers were not very good polyglots, often found it difficult to pronounce our names or even write it down for that matter. They often repeated names or used simple and easy names for them to write or pronounce. So you'll find a lot of Kojo, a lot of Aku, a lot of Kofi, and so on and so forth. And as we well know, many a times they just went ahead and gave names to the people they trafficked. It is important to also consider that the trek from the point of capture to the point of sale on the continent often lasted anywhere from 2 to 3 months. And during that time, the captured people, the trafficked people, would learn the language of their captors. And in the case of the Ehrveh speaking people or the Ehrveh speaking people, they would have to learn Twi, which is the language of the Asante. They would have to learn Fon. They would have to learn Yoruba if they didn't already know it. So by the time they are sold or by the time they embark on the ships, they are speaking the language of their captors fluently. And they would have been prohibited from speaking their native language for fear of unity and revolt. This also plays into the loss of identity that happens after capture. Novi, you've made it to my DNA results. Novi means sibling. So brother, sister, cousin is Novi in Ehrveh. Let's start with my 23andMe results. These are my 23andMe results. And it shows that I am 100% Sub-Saharan African. West African is also 100%. My regions are Ghana, Liberia, Sierra Leone. And my ethnic groups are Ehrveh, Fon, Gadangbe, and Fanti. It says, you are connected through shared ancestors to people from Togo, Benin, and Ghana, many of whom identify as Gadangme or Fanti, or speak Ehrveh language. This means some of your ancestors may have lived in this area, and you may have relatives who still live here today. Common reported ethnicities or languages spoken within this ethnic group or genetic group: Gadangme, Ga, and Dangme, Fanti, Ehrveh, Fon, Awuta, Jula. So it is clear that 23andMe has lumped Benin and Togo into Ghana, Liberia, and Sierra Leone. And that is giving me 57%. Now, my Nigerian percentage is 42.9%, which is huge for me. 42.9% Nigerian. All right, that is quite impressive. They didn't delineate which ethnic group in Nigeria specifically my ancestors came from or that I come from. So that is interesting to know. They did not specify which ethnic group. Broadly West African. My broadly West African percentage is 0.1%. And it says for over a millennium before European colonization and the Atlantic slave trade, West Africans were united under a series of powerful empires, resulting in broad similarities in music, clothing, art, and cuisine. A gradient of genetic similarity extending from Senegal to Nigeria reflects a richly complex population history in a region home to over 350 million people who form hundreds of distinct ethnic groups. Broadly, West African DNA may match several populations, making it difficult to assign to just one. Let's look at my additional ancestry regions. It says regions that reflect mixed ancestry or more recent migration in your ancestry. The Caribbean, St. Michael, Barbados. Now let's go over to my Ancestry DNA results. Here are my Ancestry DNA results. So right away, they say 3 ancestral regions. The first one is Benin, Togo at 93%. Benin, Togo at 93%. And then the second one is Central West Africa at 5%. And the third one is Ivory Coast, Ghana at 2%. That is interesting. So let's look at the ethnic groups under Benin, Togo. Right away here are my ethnic groups under Benin, Togo. There is Aja, Ehrveh, Fon, Gen, Gun, Tori, Wasi, Weme, and Yoruba. So that covers pretty much southeastern Ghana, southern Togo, southern Benin, and Nigeria. Those are my Benin, Togo ethnicity mixtures. Yeah, so that pretty much aligns with the 23andMe as well, because they also mentioned some of these groups in here. And as I mentioned, most of these are all Ehrvehs. If you see Gun and Gun, Gun, and then Gen, these are also Be speaking people. So these are also part of Aja, the Weme and Wachi as well. All right, and the Tori. All right, so let's go to my other regions. Let's check out Central West Africa. So my Central West Africa is Yoruba. It says Iya Yoruba. Where do people with this region live? They live in Benin, Burkina Faso, Ghana, Nigeria, and Togo. They are also found in Central African Republic, Sao Tome and Principe, and Sierra Leone. And then, of course, there is the Ivory Coast, Ghana. And that might be my Fanti percentage that showed up in 23andMe. All right. And I was able to find a second cousin through Ancestry DNA. Very interesting. I already contacted him. Very much a second cousin. And we were able to trace the family line through my mother's paternal grandmother. She is our shared great-grandparent. As you can see, my DNA tells our migration story. You can see that I have admixture from all of these countries throughout West Africa. They mentioned Benin, Togo, Nigeria, Ghana, Sierra Leone, Ivory Coast, Liberia, Burkina Faso. These are all West Africa. This is all of West Africa. They even mentioned Central Africa and all the way as far as Sao Tome and other places. So I say this to say this is the case for most of the Ehrveh DNAs that I have seen online. And this actually corroborates the oral tradition of how we entered into West Africa. The elders say that wherever we sojourned, whenever we got up to leave, we always left people behind, and other people went south, as well as the majority going to the west. So this is very accurate.
Representing the Ewe people of Nigeria. The Ewe ethnic group from southwest Nigeria. They are the descendants of those who journeyed from Ehrveh to various parts of modern West Africa.
So here are some words in Ehrveh language, one of the languages spoken in Ghana, that sound slightly similar to some words in Yoruba language, which is one of the languages spoken in Nigeria. So the first one is va. Va in Ehrveh means come. In Yoruba, it is wa. Wa means come. The second one is awu. Awu in Ehrveh means dress, whilst in Yoruba, it's ewu, which means dress or clothes. The next one is pakpahe, which means duck. And in Yoruba, it's pepeye, which also means duck. The next one is agbo. In Ehrveh, they say agbo, which is ram. And then in Yoruba, there's agbo, which also means ram. The next one is enu. In Ehrveh, they say enu or nu, which means mouth. And in Yoruba, there's enu, which also means mouth. So then the last but not the least is wo. Wo is you. It means you in Ehrveh. And then in Yoruba, there's iwo. Iwo means you.